Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, everybody. I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast. Today, we're going to get down to some real hard-won wisdom. And it's because I read an article about Andrea Lytle Peet and her husband, David, that just the article changed me. It made me think about the things that I let get me down and how ridiculous they are. And this podcast is about courage and love and fortitude, and it's a little bit tough. It's tough because, in 2014, Andrea was diagnosed with ALS, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease. I had a good friend die of that, and when I wrote her obituary, I thought the most poignant quote was someone who said, watching her go through that made you realize how much we take for granted, like the ability just take a breath. So it is a disease that is well known because what it does is it attacks the brain, which attacks the body, and it's a nightmare because your body shuts down on you. Andrea has written the most amazing book. It's called Hope Fights Back. And in it, she explains a lot about the disease, which isn't really the story here, but I want you to stick with it for a minute. And that most people who get this diagnosis realize that they've got, 2 to 5 years, and then they die. But a small percentage of them don't die in 2 to 5 years. And she started to realize she had a little more juice in the tank than she expected. And she did something that is so powerful and so memorable. And there's a documentary out now about her called Go On, Be Brave. And Michelle and I got to watch it when we were together last weekend. Michelle came out for a visit and we just sat on the couch sobbing. Because this is the kind of courage every one of us needs. And I don't know where you got it from, Andrea, but I'm really glad you're here. And just as a note to our listeners, Andrea's vocal cords have been very much damaged by the illness. And so her husband, David, is here. He's going to help us some when we have trouble. So bear with us because the lessons you're going to get out of this will change you like they changed us. And it's really a story of just the indomitable spirit on the one half and the other half being in sickness and in health. And so here we are, David and Andrea, welcome. We're so glad to see you and have you here.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having us, and that was a wonderful intro.
Absolutely. It's our privilege. Thank you.
Oh my God, I'm such a fan. And, that whole idea of hope fights back, the story, people, is this. Andrea realized that she still had a little more function than they expected her to have. Now, she said some things that were very profound, that it's not just your reaction when you get the diagnosis on the day of diagnosis. It's really about the day after. What are you going to do? How are you going to live? And she had one more, it was a triathlon, that one was, right? That she was going to do. I mean, let's get this straight. She was 33 when she got the diagnosis in 2014 and an athlete. And she just wanted to do that triathlon. So she shows up and she does the tri. But it's much harder because of all these symptoms that she's had. And she's lagging behind. She's like an hour behind. And she just tells the race organizers, just shut it down, go home, right? Because she's going to be late. But when she comes in, there are 100 people cheering her in. And I think that's another part of this story that's so profound, is that your cheering squad which now includes me and Michelle. Well, but they're bringing you in. And so she had this idea that she was going to, now this sounds crazy, but she was crazy, right? She got this idea she wanted to do some marathons, not just some marathons, but 50 marathons, one marathon in every state. And knowing that her legs wouldn't carry her through that as a run, she got herself one of those performance tricycles that let her ride and use her legs to power up all kinds of hills and mountains. And she did it. And okay, now I need to shut up. I've told the backstory. I don't even know where to start, which is, I guess, how are you today?
We're great. We're in Connecticut, in between it's pretty sad, the documentary.
Yeah, and I think, as Andrea mentioned, we're touring the country this fall, taking Andrea's story across the nation, and really, we're just profoundly lucky every day that we get to be here to share Andrea's story. And most people, as you mentioned in the intro, don't get the chance to have more than 9 years to say goodbye to their partner, to their spouse, or even to say, to leave their legacy, right? We've had that, especially not in this disease. It's uncommon. And we're so lucky every day to be able to do that like we're doing today.
When you said those words in sickness and in health, we all said those words, but never really understood. What do they mean now?
I mean, I think that is a question for you. But he's been there with me every step of the way. Gets me out of bed. In the morning, helps me to their storyline. It cures all of the things. Yeah.
Yeah, there should have been a line for in sickness and health and in documentary impact campaigns too, I think, because that was some fine print that I think I missed. But no, in all seriousness, I think it means the same thing to me today that it did when I signed up for it, which is that I was committed when she was conquering triathlons and doing marathons on her legs, and in sickness, I'm committed to making sure that her dreams come true, whatever those are and however those dreams change. So not just when it's convenient for me, but when it's something that maybe isn't convenient for me too. So
every year, the holidays and the full-time job while we are traveling, and it's not easy. What I signed up for, and I don't think either one of us realized hugeness of this goal and then getting the story out there.
But we're lucky. We're both lucky to be able to do it. And just as you said, Fawn, I'm going to shut up. Enough about me. Let's talk about this one's.
It's both of you, and it's you make this point in your book, and Michelle, you chime in when you're ready. I'm so in love with them. You make this point how we had the ice bucket challenge, and that was this really cute thing that brought up awareness of ALS, but it didn't really tell us what ALS was. Mm-hmm. But you're telling us. And that documentary, looking and seeing the people facing the illness who, still have dreams and hopes too. And they keep going. And I'm sure there's every level of coping and every degree of grief as they go through this. But when did you realize that you were going to be one of the lucky ones?
Man, when I got to 2 years, I got a tattoo, and I decided that I would get one smaller tattoo for every year that I lived with ALS, as a way to celebrate that milestone. But it wasn't until I got to 5 years where I thought, no, I'm tired of waiting for this disease to catch up. My mindset had been, I am just going to pedal as long as I can. And then, when I hit 5 years, I realized that I was just waiting to die, not reaching for a goal. So that was when I was like, this is where I'm willing to set a crazy goal, regardless of whether I get there. Well, at least I tried. At least I put myself out there and went for it.
So I love that. It was interesting when we stopped the video after it was over, and I said what I loved about it is, if you were looking at this as who is Andrea, not who's Andrea with ALS, like forget it. Who is Andrea?
Right.
Andrea is this person who says, I'm going to set the rules on how I want to live. In spite of whatever, yes, you knew what was ahead of you. You knew the challenge that with this diagnosis. There's 1,000 people we know, right, that they get diagnosis or the unexpected happens, and they don't make this decision, but you did, and then you guys made it together. And I think what advice do you give someone about the difference in the mindset of choosing to live full versus counting the days that have passed and I guess waiting to die?
Yeah, it is really such a different paradigm. Like, I'm so lucky in that I can set a goal to do something daily, but that setting the goal not everything. It was looking forward and not looking backwards, and grieving what I was losing. It was celebrating what I had, and I could still do. And I make the point in the documentary and in the focus on there are so many ways to be brave. And, you don't have to do a marathon. It's about recognizing what you do have and what the skills you are, and gifts you can bring to the world. Even if all you have is your eyes.
Yeah, the woman in the end,
Yeah.
who, what was it? She was going and she was taking classes in, was it physics?
Yeah. She was taking classes in physics at Arizona State University after already having advocated in front of Congress for legislation to benefit people living with ALS. There's another piece to the story that didn't make its way into the documentary that we can give you some more information
Share her name real quick. I know it started with the M and I'm blanking.
Sure. It's Mayuri Saxena. She lives in New York. She's been an ALS advocate since she was diagnosed, been very active in the community, and severely impacted by it, right? She's using Yes, yeah, thank you for those who are listening. She is completely confined to a chair. I'm sorry, to a bed, and beyond that, the only way that she can communicate, the only muscles that she has the ability to control, are her eyes and her eyelids, basically. So she communicates completely through what's known as eye gaze technology, typing out words and completing sentences and paragraphs, writing emails, things like that, using a computer and a electric light that is queued up to her eyes. But while we were in New York, so Andrea was there to do the Brooklyn Marathon in that spring. And while we were visiting with Mayuri, there was a knock on Mayuri's door. And she wasn't, the family wasn't expecting other visitors. We weren't expecting anyone else there. And who was at the door but the guy from Uber Eats, who was bringing a dozen rainbow bagels with plain cream cheese. And Mayuri's mother answered the door and said, where did these come from? And Mayuri, in the middle of our conversation, said, I ordered those for Andrea. She needs to carbo load before the marathon. These little acts of kindness, surprise acts of kindness that she was doing. I mean, that all of us, take for granted when their partner, their friend, or their family does them for them. She is in the middle of being filmed as part of a documentary, having a conversation, visiting with us, and just kind of doing this off to the side surreptitiously without us knowing. It was just, that's who she is, right? And the disease has not changed who she is. It's taken away almost everything that we would consider physical and human about, but it's not taking that away.
Because there's still a human being. That's the hard part of ALS, is there's still a full human being on the inside, right, fully aware. And a lot of people don't have those coping skills. I just got to say, this book, Hope Fights Back. People, Hope Fights Back. Get this book, because there are so many moments in the book that were really touching. And, your relationship with your mother, how that has evolved. And then, David's dad's a doctor. Like, they got these great characters that carry the story through. And then, she, the whole time, she's looking forward, and she's wanting that 50th marathon to be Boston. Doesn't quite work out that way, but it's like, it's going to be the Boston Marathon. She's like, Boston. And after all that work, trying to get them to approve for her to be on there with her trike, they won't let her do it, because they allowed the people with the trike hand gears to go, like the handicap ones, right? And those are called wheelchair bikes, right? Or
they're called hand cycles, Andrea.
Hand cycles. Okay, the hand cycles. What was the other one so the hand cycles will go faster. What's the one that goes slower?
Well, yeah, I could do it if I were running. I would have up to 6 hours. If I were walking, but I don't do that.
Well, I think the other option was that she would basically sit in something called a push chariot, which is basically like, someone would be running the Boston Marathon while she is in essentially an adult stroller with wheels, which, given the athlete that she is, given that she's still capable of doing these marathons herself and using her muscles, she didn't really want that.
And so they didn't let her. So does anyone hold Andrea Lytle Peet and company back? No. They just did it the day before on the course. And this is just the most amazing thing, because you posted it and your old college buddy saw that you were going to be doing this, and she rides that trike. And I'm telling you, she's a rock star. We know this, but she gets to the finish, and this friend from college has shown up, and he gives her his Boston Marathon medal. So she's got the medal, and which I'm sure that meant more to you than what everybody else had. And That was number 49, right?
So technically, Andrea doesn't count that in her 50. We're often corrected that she's done 51 marathons, including her own unofficial Boston Marathon. Yeah. She did another Massachusetts marathon earlier.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Okay, so you don't. Excuse me, 51.
I know.
I didn't mean to imply you were. I didn't mean to imply you were a slacker there.
Yeah.
that just so sets the tone of your personality. Like that cracks me up. Like, yeah, no, that one that didn't meet my criteria. So we're throwing that out. And we're doing this in a official way.
Last one is what Prince of Wales, is that it in Alaska? So they go, and I mean the whole crew goes. Family, the doctor who hadn't really let her know that he didn't think she could do it, but he decides, he said that if she did it, he would be there at the finish. Everybody's there in Alaska. And she goes, and there is a beast of a mountain, right? She's just riding up this thing, and she's out of energy, because now at this point you're realizing your body's a little weaker, right? And and she's having trouble. And there's that handsome husband next to her, and he's like getting her up there. And then she gets a little close. It's like getting her to do like one more, just a little more and a little more. And she's getting there and getting there. Then her friends come and circle around her and say, "Come on, you can do it." And then they start doing da 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 da. Right. So she's got the Rocky thing, and then she just glides up there and then sails down the other side of the mountain and finishes it like it's nothing.
Those women were on their course looking for the science that we'd put out honoring their late husbands. So they're a group of 4 widows and friends who, they have been through their worst of illness, and they agree that comes with it, and they also stay in their fight so that one day other families don't have to go through it. And I think it is a beautiful way to honor their husbands.
That's even more amazing.
Yeah. So you were saying there were a lot of widows and friends and people had lost, that they all showed up for that particular race and were there to honor.
That's right. Yeah. And that group of widows that you read about cheering Andrea up that last hill in Alaska, they were the ones that did it, right? So it's kind of that embodiment of Andrea having given so much to the community, and then the community who had been there giving back to her at the same time, giving her the strength to finish that last race.
Well, the other thing that really stood out to me again at the end was I'm so proud that you really put your arms around the people that were there to help support you. Because we so often think we can do things on our own, or we don't want to be a burden, we don't ask. And seeing how that all crescendoed right around how much they keep you going and how much you needed them, and just need to say, I'm feeling weak today. And they carried you through. They were beside you. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about the importance of asking for help, bringing your community in, being vulnerable, because it's uncomfortable for so many of us to do it.
Yeah, as much as my friends say that I inspired them, their showing up inspires me to keep going. And so it is this positive feedback loop. We're just feeding each other their hope and their power. Like, you lean on me, I will lean on you. And I can't ask for anything better than that. And So for anyone out there, who is on a struggling, like reach out, tell your story, be vulnerable. I think that you will find other people who want to share that, who want to say, I have been there, or I relate to what you are going through.
Yeah, and I think, another thing that has been really special about Andrea's journey that I've seen, at least since she started doing it, was that she committed herself early on in taking this challenge on to doing it for the community, right? She started with the purpose was to honor people in the community, not to glorify her own achievements. So when she was doing marathons, she was doing them for different people who were in Austin, who were in the state of Washington, who were in different places. So, I mean, I think it's also really instructive of kind of not what are you doing, what great thing are you going to achieve, but who are you doing it for? And start with the who are you doing it for as the starting place, which has a lot of great applications in life, in leadership, in team building generally, right?
And you raised a lot of money too.
Over $1 million,
ALS.
right?
Yeah, we have donated $1 million, and those are like small. We don't have big benefactors. Those are friends and friends of friends, and it's been amazing.
$1 million and counting. $1 million and counting. We, it's not the primary goal. I mean, it's one of the goals because in order to end ALS, it's an expensive disease that we need to end as quickly as possible. I think what we always say to audiences that see the film or hear Andrea's story, if you're inspired, we're incredibly grateful for that. But candidly, it's an incomplete answer, right? We want you to be inspired to do something about it. Be inspired to donate, be inspired to share the story with others, be inspired to get off the couch, get outside, do something for yourself. Be inspired to do something. Don't just be inspired, period.
And I think that whole point about the importance of having a goal, which that applies to every one of us, is that when we, you can go dark and you get in a sad place, but if there's a goal out there, it gives you purpose. Yeah. And just so what are you looking at for the future? I mean, how are you feeling physically right now? What are they telling you?
I mean, overall, I'm again so lucky my health seems to be stable. I getting around, using a walker, but I still drive and speak and eat and breathe on my own. And for 9 years into ALS, those are all major victories.
And tell us about the bluebirds. That was such a beautiful
not bluebirds, they're swallows, right?
The swallows.
We are blue swallows. So
yes, the blue swallows.
Yeah. Yeah. So swallows are a symbol of hope in the ALS community. And Andrea started getting a swallow for every year she has, after she was diagnosed with ALS. She is up to 9 and counting right now. Each year since, I guess 4 or 5, they have their own little wrinkles on them. One of them was designed by the daughter of a dear friend of ours. Another one during one of the COVID years had a little mask off the beak. And of course, after she finished her 50 marathons, there's one swallow that has a ribbon of a 50 right in front of it. So as her tattoo artist says in her story and in the film and in the book, we're going to fill up the entire arm. You're going to have a whole sleeve of blue swallows.
Love it.
And yeah, we are. It's a way to commemorate and celebrate something that people wouldn't ordinarily celebrate, right? Getting a terminal diagnosis, but it's a way that we honor the fact that we know how lucky we are.
I also thought that what you said about, that 5-year mark where, you realize you're just waiting to die. And then you're like, this blows. This is not going to be the way I'm going to play this out. Like, that's to me so inspiring that you can just take your power and say, I'm not going to be a victim of this. I'm going to live every day. Yeah. And, so what do you remember about that actual moment when you had that realization?
Yeah, with ALS, we know what the end point is. It is always death. And so, what are you going to do? Until then, I think living is not knowing what the end point is. You are working for something for yourself, for your community. You're working towards something, and just that difference and mindset just changes your focus. You're not looking backwards, you're looking forward, you're working towards something. And I worked towards things my whole life, and never once you could just go to the gym on a daily basis, but if you're put a finish line in front of me and I need to work towards that, then yeah.
And I know that saying, right, that we have this illusion that we're doing the thing to win or be first or be perfect. And I think just what your story helps to really elevate is the fact that truly the only person you're competing against is yourself, right? So you set these goals, and success was doing it. It was loving the process. It wasn't about the time. Yeah. It wasn't about all of those things that were trivial. It was really about you confronting your fears and doing the thing that was hard to keep going, right? And it's just incredible.
Yeah, the thing that was impossible. Everybody else said no. And you're like, yeah, let's see about this. Because I think when you're doing 50 marathons, has to be a very intimidating thing. But when you're doing them one at a time, although sometimes you were doing them back to back to back, because you did them in 5 years, right? And you had the COVID years made it a lot harder to pull that off. Since you do have a longer, you've got the longer version of this, can you live to be 75 years old, or how is this going to play out? I know it's a question mark, but
yeah, I think the answer to that question is we don't know, and that underscores how we really need more research and a better understanding of what ALS is and how ALS functions. There are people living with ALS. We saw a good friend this weekend who's been living with it for 19 years. There are people like Stephen Hawking who lived for even longer than that. There are versions of what we right now call ALS that are longer term, so to speak, and much shorter term. There are versions of ALS right now that are genetic onset. There's some hereditary aspect, and some that is called sporadic, which is what Andrea has, which is science speak for we have no idea where it came from. So I think the answer to your question is maybe and hopefully, and at the same time, we should really know as soon as possible so that we can help everyone who's diagnosed with ALS get to that point and not just have luck of the draw or by chance. Yeah.
Are they doing research to see how your really endurance athletics has impacted your longevity?
I would love to find a study like that. I can't say my doctor is thinking outside of the box and researching it with reversals, like people who have documented cases of ALS and their symptoms backtrack, and they can live long, healthy lifespan, and not one of those. Yes.
Yeah. So, and to your question, there is research and there have been studies done out there on exercise and ALS. So far, it's inconclusive because I think in part it's really unclear that whether there are different kinds of ALS and different ways that ALS affects different people. So in some of those published reports that you would find that that some clinicians would say that it hurts you, and that really all you should need to do is just put on weight, because that has the effect of slowing the disease for some people. For other people, like Andrea, we've seen that there are not only mental benefits, but physical benefits to engaging and to use a sciencey term, innervating the muscles in your body in the muscle groups that are responding, so that maybe that allows you to continue doing certain life functions that otherwise would be weakening or atrophying. So, as part of one of our goals would be seeing whether there is a way to conclusively get an answer, at least for a subset of the ALS population, about who are the people who would benefit from not necessarily doing a marathon, but doing something like getting on an exercise bike or stretching or doing some other form of physical intervention, so that then while we are waiting for the pipeline of drugs to come along and help people down the line, we can be doing those simple kind of physical interventions so that they can stay strong, so that they can continue to have the lung capacity to breathe appropriately.
And we have to say that the reason that exercise was so controversial was because military veterans are twice as likely to develop ALS. Many endurance athletes also develop ALS, but obviously there are many thousand more people that don't. So it's a mystery.
That's right.
Well, Andrea, your life, and really for both of you, Andrea, David, I mean, your life, it is what it is. This is where you are. This is the life you have been given to live. And we all have our own struggles and challenges, and we all have our own wisdom and beauty that comes with it. Just in general, based on your perspective, just what wisdom would you give our listeners?
Yeah, so I was crying in the car one day when I was at my lowest, shortly after I was diagnosed, and I realized that I could be depressed, or I could live my life, and the time would pass either way. So I mean, some steps did not comes down to that simple choice. I realized that there wouldn't be no bottom to my grief.
Well,
Rather than take me down. So I can tell that, when I am more positive than David, I can be more positive. Like, we can just enjoy our lives together for as long as we have. So made me that it's not helpful.
Yeah, I think for me, the piece of wisdom that I come back to often is that, how I dealt with our diagnosis back in 2014, and how I kind of continue to deal with it is kind of sparked by this realization that there's really no complete linear getting better from or getting over some things. And that's okay. It's okay for things to be cyclical, and for, the pain of that anticipatory grief of giving up the life that you thought you would have. You don't get over it and then everything is fine from that realization ongoing forward. It's something that can come back in waves, and sometimes those waves are worse than others. But if you understand the nature of it, I think that helps you from getting too low when the waves come, and it also allows you the kind of grace to be patient with yourself, to just kind of let it chill over you, and understand that there's, light of the tunnel is a silly kind of phrase in this circumstance because it gets out of the whole linear cyclical
right.
I'm trying to work with here, but there is, there's it's going to pass, and you can pick your head up out of the ocean. Maybe it's a wave. I don't know. I'll workshop the analogy a little more.
Fawn's words of advice are always, "This shit storm will pass." So
No, every shitstorm ends.
Yeah,
every shitstorm ends.
They
all do.
I guess the only addendum I would add to it is that, it's probably going to come back. It will probably come back in form in a way that either you completely anticipate or maybe
not.
But even when it comes back, it'll also pass again, right? So
yes, the joys of life and ups and downs. This has been so amazing. I think the couple of things that just I want to reiterate that you shared, and love the comments here, but to the point, how you live life is a choice. So choose wisely. And the reminders of just celebrating what you have every day. Knowing that set goals, that was the other thing that came through loud and clear. You have to set goals for you. So find ways to be brave by doing those things that fuel you. And then I think a big one too was when you're inspired, be inspired to act. Yeah. So before we go, we have to talk about how people can act and support what you're doing, support ALS, support someone they know that may have a diagnosis. But then I also just want to say, we all hope that when we look at our life that we can feel like it mattered.
Yeah.
And I would just say to the both of you, through what you are doing, you are an incredibly positive impact on this world. And so I thank you for who you are and what you're doing, because I know it's not easy.
Yeah.
But you're doing it and it matters. So thank you.
Such a privilege, really, to meet you and have this time with you and learn from you, because there's a lot of learning there. And
thank you so much. We hope our story can not only help people that are listening now, but when people are downloading your podcasts 5-10 years from now, right? Whether they're whether they're connected to the ALS world or not, we hope they gather some strength from it too. So thank you.
How they support you all.
Right. We got to say how they can support you, where they can get in touch with you. I have to remind you, and I have to say this book title again: Hope Fights Back. Hope Fights Back. Hope Fights Back. Get that book. Mm-hmm. And the documentary is Go On, Be Brave. So we need to know how they can support you. And is there a way they can see the documentary if they're not anywhere that there's a screening?
Yeah. So first and foremost, you can go to teamdrea.org. That is the website, the foundation that Andrea and I started after she was diagnosed. That gives you more information on her journey, her story. You can also go to goonbebrave.com. That's where you can find out more about the film. You can also donate in both places if you feel so inclined to do so. As far as seeing the film, there are a couple different ways to do that. First, on goonbebrave.com and on teamdrea.org, we are going to be announcing very soon a way to gift a short-term rental of the film to someone else as part of a package for the holidays. So that will be available. We're currently in conversations on streaming to hopefully get it into a platform early next year. So be on the lookout for it then in early 2024. And then finally, anything you want to say about Hope Fights Back and where to get it?
There is the audio book, and you can find anywhere books are sold, preferably local book bestseller. But yeah.
Yep, local bookseller or online, anywhere books are sold for Hope Fights Back.
And it's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. Aren't you blown away?
I'm just so glad to have this opportunity. You made my life better.
Yeah, mine too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we only wish you all good things.
We're cheering for you.
Yeah.
Team Drea.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.